So one of the first things that we need to do in order to do the whole thing with preparing the fiber and the fabric and everything for dyeing is I need to measure it out. So since the first thing I'm going to be talking about is linen, I thought I would show you how I measure it out as far as the thread goes. The fabric is just, I'm going to cut squares of fabric and that's all I'm doing. But as far as getting the thread or yarn ready, I wanted to show you how I do it. For one thing, this is an antique click reel. It clicks every 40 turns for 80 yards. So, but what I'm going to be doing is I'm just going to be doing 20 yard skein. So I'm just going to be turning it 10 times. So what I'm going to do here is there's a space here that just happens to be perfect for holding that on. So I'm going to turn it 10 times for 20 yards. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. The reason I know this is 20 yards, this is a 2 yard around. So for 2 yards times 10 times around, it's 20 yards. So one of the first things I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this out, bring it around, and I'm going to just tie them together. And then I'm going to tie it around, but I'm going to tie it loosely so that there's no resist from the yarn on itself, because when this gets wet, it will swell somewhat. And then the other things that I'm going to do is I'm going to tie it all 4 sides. This is acrylic yarn. One of the reasons why I use acrylic yarn is because it doesn't dye with natural dyes, and I can see the ties easy when it comes to taking it off. So I'm going to tie this relatively loosely. I'm leaving probably about 3/4 of an inch space here to give it plenty of room to swell, but not so loose that the ties slide around all over the place, because that's kind of defeating your purpose. And then once I get all of these tied, I can take this one off and do the next. If you ever get the opportunity to buy one of these click reels, make sure it's in good working condition. This one here we lucked out on. Scott found it at an antique mall. And he came over and he says, I think I've got something that you're going to want to see. I said, okay. And it was at the Midland Sash Antique Mall in downtown Indianapolis. And so we went over, took me over there, and there was this click reel. And I was like, wow, that's really, really pretty. And so I looked it over. Now, mind you, I've done absolutely no repair on this. Everything is in exactly the condition I bought it. So everything's nice and tight. The click mechanism, which is all wooden, in the box still works beautifully. The legs are nice and flush and balanced and everything. So this was a prize, and I think we paid, I wanted to say $65. It tells me a couple of things. One, the person selling it may not have realized what they had, because these things, even in not good working conditions, can cost you over $100. To get one in working condition, you're looking closer to the $200 range for the most of the antique malls, at least around here. And I just don't think they realized the value of what they were selling, because this thing has been wonderful. I use it to wind off all the skeins for dyeing the wool. Anything that I'm doing for dyeing, or for, like if I've got, sometimes I use this here with to wind off my spinning wheel, and that kind of thing. So, and I also go back and forth between the Swift and this if I need to rewind something. Like I said, this thing is invaluable. So anyways, once you've got that done, you can just take the skein off, and so you've got technically 5 ties, because you've got this one up here, and then you've got the other 4. So that one here is ready to be done. Now, when I do the dry weight and everything, I'm going to have to subtract. Well, I'll go ahead and leave them in there. They don't weigh that much. Anyway, so these are ready now for the next part of the process, which is going to be scouring. So I want to at least show you how I wind things off and how the ties and stuff are put on there. So just want to let you know. Bye. One of the first things that we need to do before we either scour, mordant, or dye is to find out our weight of goods, which is in a lot of places it's just WOG. And that is your dry weight of goods. Now I want to find out how much we lose when we scour. So I'm going to weigh each of the fibers before I put them in the scouring pot and record those. So hang on. So how many grams does this cotton weigh? It looks like it weighs 16 grams. So I'm going to record that. Okay. Let's find out how much our cotton fabric weighs. That weighs 104 grams. And now our 1,000 grams of cotton yarn. Looks like that weighs 138 grams. Okay. Now let's weigh the linen. The small section here weighs, looks like about, again, 18 grams. The reason why I'm doing the small ones is because the cochineal dye I'm going to try to get 5 different colors out of. And so I have 5 small 20-gram skeins of the cotton and linen specifically for the cochineal experiment. There we go. The linen fabric weighs 102 grams. And the linen thread, the 1,000 grams weighs, the 1,000 yards weigh 162 grams. Now I think it's interesting to note that on the yarn, or the thread, that the 520-yard, the linen weighed 2 grams more. But when you get up to 1,000 yards, there's a big difference between the cotton and the linen. The cotton was 138 grams, and the linen was 162 grams. But at this point now, we know how much that weighs dry weight. We can calculate how much we need for the chemicals for scouring. But also I'd like to find out how much each of them lose in the scouring process. So this gets us started, at least this gives us a starting point. Okay, once we have our measurements for the dried weight of goods, I want to be able to calculate what I'm going to need of each of the chemicals. So the first thing that I'm going to do is, I've got it written down, but I will put the recipe up on the website. So I need 35 grams of soda ash for every 100 grams of fiber. Now I'm going to split up the linen and the cotton. So I need to add these two together. So there's 120, there's 282 grams of linen, and there's 120, 238 grams of the cotton. So I need to have 35 grams of soda ash for every 100 grams of this. So I'm going to do the calculation, and again I will put this in on the website, but we'll just do it real quick. Okay, so I need 2.82 and 2.38. So I need to do for here is I need to take 35 grams times 2.82, and I need to take the 35 grams down here and multiply it by 2.38. And that will tell me how many grams of the soda ash I need. Using my handy dandy calculator, so I'm going to go 35 times 2.82, so I'm going to need 98.7 grams of soda ash for the linen, and then I'm going to need 35 times 2.38, so I'm going to need 83.3 grams of soda ash for the cotton. So let's go weigh that out. First thing I need to do is something to put the soda ash in. You've got these little metal dishes that originally were for soft cat food for the cats, but neither of the cats like the soft cat food, so I just put these aside to do measuring and stuff with for the natural dyes. So the first thing I'm going to do is tear it out, and we're back down to 0. So for the linen, we needed 98.7 grams. So I'm going to pour the soda ash in here until we get 98.7. Oops. Here's 100. Well, I think since it's soap, I'm not going to worry too much about 2.3 grams. So there we go. This is for the linen. And then we'll do the cotton, which I need 83.3 grams of this. And there gives me 84. So that's for the cotton. So now that I got the soda ash measured out, let's go and get the scouring pots ready. All right, now we've got the linen and the cotton weighed with their dry weights. Before we can do anything about scouring them, we have to make sure they are thoroughly wetted. So I have 2 buckets here. They have 2 gallons of water in them each. The buckets are 5 gallon. And I am going to put the fiber down into the water so that it can soak for the next couple of hours. You might think that you only need to actually get the fabric and the yarn wet, but it really needs to be thoroughly inundated with the water. That's why it takes so long. You want to get that inner fiber wet. Obviously with linen that takes a little longer. Now I'm going to show you what I've done with the thread. I've got my bundle here, and I've actually tied a piece of, well, this is linen where I have straightened up the fiber around it. And the reason why is thread this thin tends to get tangled very, very easily. And this gives me a handle to deal with it. And what I'm going to do later when I do it is I'll have a spoon or something underneath of this so that I can grab this and turn this as much as I need without getting the fiber so thoroughly tangled. So I'm going to throw this down in here, and I'm going to push it down very gently because I don't want the threads to tangle up any more than they have to. And I did the same thing with the cotton. So the cotton too has a linen handle. Here it is. And then I'm just going to, now linen obviously takes up water a lot better than linen does. But still, I want something that I can grab onto this rather than messing with, because see now I can lift the whole thing out and keep those fibers all nice and straight. See? And by doing that, it'll just make it easier for when it comes to mortaring and the dyeing process. So we're going to let those sit for a couple of hours, and we'll be back. Now I have 2 pots on here. I'm going to just do this one here for cotton and this one here for linen. So I have filled them about, I don't know, 2/3 of the way full of water. And now I need to add my soda ash. Now you need to add the soda ash very, very slowly. So this one's the cotton one. So I'm going to very slowly add the soda ash. And there's going to start being some bubbles. You need to stir it to dissolve. Now mind you, I haven't added any heat to this yet. It does have hot water in here, but I haven't added any heat to it yet. Okay? Now let's add the one to the linen. Now that I've got the soda ash dissolved in the pot, I'm going to add my fiber. Okay, it's been a couple of hours now, so I'm getting the pots heated up, but I'm going to go ahead and add the fiber. Now this little pot here, remember I showed you the one in the linen video with the one that was hadn't been bleached? This is the one for it. It was 20 grams, the little skein, it's a 20-yard skein, and so I put 7 grams of soda ash in here. So this is the first one I'm going to put in. Now remember, this one here is cotton. I'm going to put in the yarn. I just kind of squeeze it out a little bit. Now I'm going to put this down in here and in here because I want to be able to get to the yarn really easily. And so I've got this through the loop, and I'm just going to put it down in here. Not going to hurt a thing. And there's one piece of the cotton fabric. The other piece of cotton fabric. As you can tell, it's not hot yet. So what I'm going to do, another thing that this spoon is good for, is it keeps the lid from completely sealing, and this keeps it from boiling over later when it starts to boil. And I do want to bring it up to a boil. Just like with the cotton, I'm going to put the yarn in first. Again, I've got the tie, and so what I'm going to do is I've got a spoon here that I'm going to put down in here. And it's not as long as the other one, so we'll deal with that. Just to give it a little bit more cleaning power, I'm going to put about 1/8 of a cup in each one of them of Orvis paste. Obviously, with the little one here, I'm going to have to keep an eyeball on it so it doesn't overflow and boil over. By the way, did you know that if you put a wooden spoon across the top of a pot, it won't boil over? Really handy for potatoes and pasta. And now we let them boil for several hours. I'll check in with you later. Okay, we have now finished the scouring process. I let everything boil for about 5 hours yesterday. It's funny, the darkest liquid that's got all the crap and everything in it is from the raw, unprocessed linen. So basically this is unbleached, just straight linen and everything. So the funny part is this is only from 20 grams of the linen. I mean, there is the amount of the linen that produced that much gunk. Now it's interesting because look at the color difference. The color really lightened up. Now mind you, it's still dark. It's a nice pretty silver color though, where it used to be kind of this golden brown. So I think that's interesting. This also tells me that this is definitely dew-redded. Water-redded is more blonde. Dew-redded is the grays. So this is definitely dew-redded. But still, look at the color difference of just scouring this, and all this came out of the raw, unprocessed linen. It's kind of cool, isn't it? It's also kind of gross. This is one of the reasons why I definitely wanted to scour this. Okay, so now let's look at the normal linen. Now remember, this linen was marked prepared for dyeing, and we got that amount of color out of it. And again, this was using the soda ash. I used 35 grams per 100 grams of fiber, and even though it was prepared for dyeing, a lot of stuff came out of it. Now, my guess is that there's definitely some spinning oils in here. There's probably some sizing on it, although linen's pretty stiff on its own. This actually just may be tannin coming out of the fiber. So it's not as dark as the raw unprocessed, obviously, but it's still got quite a bit of impurities that came out of the water. Now let's test and see how much weight it lost during the scouring process. Now the 5 small samples of yarn weighed 18 grams. The 5 large skeins of yarn weighed 162 grams, and the fabric weighed 102. Let's start with the 5 small ones and see how much they lost. So the 5 small ones weigh exactly the same, which is kind of interesting, but they weigh identical to what they did before scouring. So let's see what the big ones weigh. Now, interesting, maybe this is just because this is a bigger, it's a 10 times more yarn, but it actually lost, it weighs 152, so it actually lost 10 grams during the scouring process. Again, I find that really interesting. Now, let's see how much we lost with the fabric. And the fabric weighs exactly the same as well. Now, that's interesting as too. I didn't expect that. I figured the linen fabric would lose the most, but apparently the linen fabric didn't lose any, and all of the impurities must have come out of the linen yarn. Oops, let's see if I can get that. There. So 8 to 10 grams lost. So it was all in the yarn. That is very interesting to know. And that gives me something to say when next time I want to do some dyeing, I do not have to scour the linen fabric because it really is prepared for dyeing. The linen thread, on the other hand, definitely has to be scoured. Interesting. Now let's check the cotton. And here's the liquid from the cotton. I'm really impressed when it said prepared for dyeing. I believe they meant what they said. There were some impurities that came out. I'd be curious to see if it came out of the yarn or out of the fabric, or if we could even tell the difference because there's so little here. I mean, it looks just kind of like muddy water. Big, huge difference. So let's go see how much it weighs now. Okay, the 5 small samples weighed 16 grams. The large 5 samples weighed 138 grams, and the fabric weighed 104. So let's start with the 5 small ones. So let's get over here to the scales and grab the small ones. And they weigh 18 grams. Now that's interesting. They actually gained 2 grams. That's weird. I wonder why. Let's see what the large skeins. They too gained a little. No, I take that back. They weigh exactly the same. So if they weigh exactly the same and it's the same fiber, I wonder, now it weighs exactly the same. Nope, 8.2. I wonder if the impurities that was gained in the acrylic yarn, which, I mean, look how much difference there is in the colors between the acrylic yarn that was before and then after. I mean, it did pick up some impurities. So I wonder if some of the weight gained on the linen was part of the impurities being picked up by the acrylic. That's something interesting. That's something we need to think about. So let's see how much did the fabric change. So it together weighed 104 grams, and it gained 2 grams. Again, I find that very interesting because the sizing was lost. Of course, it did tighten up, really tightened up in the weave. So I find that interesting as well. But yeah, it gained 2 grams. So, again, I'm beginning to think that might have, well, of course, this doesn't have any ties on it. I have no idea why it gained 4 grams, or 2 grams. That is just really, really interesting. So the small samples gained 2 grams, and the fabric gained 2 grams, but the large samples are exactly the same. Well, I tell you what, I think I'm going to go ahead and count the cotton thread and the fabric here as prepared for dyeing, with so little color coming out. The linen fabric, I'm going to go ahead and count prepared for dyeing. I still may, I don't know, I may go ahead and scour the linen thread, but as far as the raw, oh, absolutely, that has to be scoured. But we'll be curious to find out how much change in the color there is on it, and when it comes to the dyeing process. So I may actually put some in the pots that have not been scoured, and let's find out how much of a difference there is. It may not be necessary on the linen and the cotton, but we'll check. So once again, there is the raw unprocessed, or unbleached, I should say, linen. There's the original. There's how much it changed color, and that's what came out of it, which explains the color change. And then we go down here to the linen, and that's how much came out of the linen. And there is the scoured linen ready to be mortared. And then let's go down to the cotton, and the cotton ready to be mortared. Yeah, I'm really impressed with this. The prepared for dyeing cotton means it. The prepared for dyeing linen, I think I'm still going to find out what gave that color. I don't think it's the fabric, because it's a big piece of fabric and it didn't change any weight. So I'm thinking it's definitely got to be the thread. And then, of course, whoa, boy, did that really do it. Yeah, that's pretty nasty water. And I'll be honest with you, while the other two didn't smell the best in the world, this one smelled really, really bad while it was cooking. So now I get to dump it out. So anyways, I thought that was a really interesting with the experiment with the scouring, and it tells me what I need to do from now on. So remember, I will put the recipes for the scouring that I used on the thefiberpusher.com website for you guys to use. And I hope you follow along with me on the die series and learn along as I learn. And yeah, this is going to be a lot of fun, isn't it? So I'll talk to you later. Bye.